Hi, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing The Gunslinger by Stephen King. So this is the first book in the Dark Tower series. It was written in 1982, but it's really interesting. The edition that I have has a foreword by the author, and the foreword is dated 2003, and so it sounds like basically Stephen King went through and wrote this entire series, and then when he was done, he wanted to make it a little bit more cohesive, and so he went back and re-edited the earlier books in the series to make the whole thing flow better and tie in. So that was interesting. I know that George Lucas kind of did something similar. You know, he's always tweaking the Star Wars movies. So it was interesting to see an author do that on an already completed series. So now I have to be very careful that when I read future books in the series, I still get the ones that came out after 2003 so that they've all been edited too and are kind of like the same editions. So I have never read a Stephen King novel before, and it's because I am a very easily scared person. I don't like really creepy horror things, but I do like very interesting psychological things. And when I was in high school, I remember they made us read a short story by Stephen King that I loved. It was so intriguing and thought-provoking. So I've wanted to read something by him for a while, but I wanted to make sure it was something that was more on the, like, thought-provoking, intriguing, look at the world differently kind of genre, instead of the just terrifying, you will never sleep again kind of genre. So I researched a lot, and a lot of people recommended the Dark Tower series, and then it's become even more popular since they made it into a movie, so I thought I would give it a read. I ended up liking this book a lot. It was very dark and a very gritty world, but I wasn't too scared to read it, and I am the most easily terrified person in the world. So I was very glad about that. And this book is very interesting because it's really hard to even figure out what genre it is. It's called The Gunslinger, and the main character is a gunslinger, and the world he's going through feels very much like a Western, so the whole book does have definitely a Western tone to it. And then it's also either fantasy or science fiction, and I've read the entire first book, and I'm still not sure which. There are definitely strange phenomena that happen, and they're presented as magical, but then that magic is also like a very science fiction-ish kind of magic, and this is also like a post-apocalyptic future world. So it feels very old-timey and Western, but it's definitely our world, like hundreds or thousands of years later. So, and like there will be references to like songs of old, and there'll be songs that would have been on the radio when this book came out. So it's kind of Western dystopian fantasy sci-fi, maybe? I don't know. I have no idea what genre this is, but it is very good. I like this book a lot. I've already ordered the next one in the series, and I would definitely recommend it. So if you think this sounds at all interesting, I would recommend that you go read it, and then come back to hear my opinions. So one of the things I thought was very interesting about this book is that it doesn't actually have very much of a plot. Most of the things that happens are flashbacks. If you just follow the actual events of the story from where it starts, you have the gunslinger staying at someone's house, then walking across the desert, then meeting a young boy, then walking through the desert and through some mountains, and then he talks to the man in black. And it's not a whole lot of events actually happen throughout most of the span of the book, and mostly what develops the story are different flashbacks. You know, first we flash back very briefly to the town where the gunslinger killed every single person there, and then you flash back farther to his childhood and kind of see what it was like growing up in the Order of the Gunslingers or whatever. And we still don't quite know what the Gunslingers are. They're like some kind of maybe a religious order or something. They're like warrior monks. It kind of reminds me of the Jedi from the Star Wars prequels, you know, where they have these very strict behavioral codes. And it's interesting, and they're working to instill very specific values in their children that don't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And they're very concerned with honor, and the gunslinger is definitely on a mission. He has to find the tower, and we still barely know what the tower is. But apparently it's important enough for him to like give up all of his humanity, and it's interesting because he clearly, like, he has humanity and he cares about people, but he has been raised to believe that there are other things more important, even though like his entire order is destroyed somehow, and we don't really know how that happened. He's like the last gunslinger, but still he believes very strongly that it's more important for him to complete whatever his mission is than to actually improve the lives of the people he meets. Oh, and the Gunslinger does have a name. People call him Roland, but he never uses that. When we're narrating kind of from his perspective, he always seems to think of himself as the Gunslinger, and the name Roland is this like disconnected memory that's like a label that other people use, but it doesn't mean anything to him. And I think it's so strange that, you know, as a child they had that like the whole setup was weird, but then that scene where they had him with the hawk when he was challenging his master and becoming an official gunslinger, and you know, he got his pet hawk, who he loved and nurtured, killed, and he horribly maimed his master, and everyone was very proud of him and telling him that that was what they'd wanted from him, and now he was ready to go be a man. So I mean, and it seemed like the whole purpose of his childhood was to strip away his humanity, and it's getting pretty stripped away, but he still kind of connects to people. He meets women and talks to them, but he's not really interested in them. He definitely was in love in the past, and I talk about that, and maybe that hurt him, and that's why he doesn't care anymore. But, you know, he meets the woman Alice in that town, and I don't know if there just aren't a lot of men in this post-apocalyptic world, or if the Gunslinger is just the most attractive man on the face of the earth. I don't know. But every woman he meets throws herself at him, and he's just sort of like, I suppose I maybe have time if you make it quick. And it's just ridiculous. You know, Alice just desperately wants him. The creepy town leader there wants him, and he wants her too. It's a very weird relationship they have. The whole thing was very strange to me. The Gunslinger definitely is not an emotionally balanced person, and he definitely does not know how to have healthy relationships, but it was very interesting to just kind of watch the way he interacted with people. When he met that first man he stayed with at the very edge of the desert, he was thinking about killing him, but the man convinced him not to, and then he logically decided, oh, he didn't have to. And it's this very disconnected thing. And so then, you know, he's farther in at the way station area, and he meets the young boy Jake, and he decides to, you know, take care of him. And they say that he grows to love Jake. And so at first you're excited because you're thinking, oh, he's developing some humanity. He's going to connect to this boy. And then he gets the prophecy that his options are either to take the boy away and raise him, and the boy can be happy and have a healthy life, or if he keeps pursuing the tower, then the boy's life will be sacrificed. And so the Gunslinger decides that it's worth it. And even though he loves this boy kind of like a father, he's still going to sacrifice him for this goal of the tower. And we don't even know what this is, so we don't know why it's so important to him. And it was really interesting to see their dynamic from that point on, because then the Gunslinger started emotionally distancing himself from Jake a lot. And Jake clearly knew that the Gunslinger was basically going to kill him, and they were both expecting this, and it was this horrible, twisted relationship where they both knew that eventually the Gunslinger was going to cause Jake's death, and neither one of them could do anything about it, and that was so uncomfortable, and you were almost relieved when Jake finally died, because this inevitable, horrible thing was over, and you'd known it was coming, and at least now you can be done with it. And you know, the Gunslinger regrets when he hurts people. When he had to kill everyone in the town because they were attacking him, he regretted it, but he was still doing it. And like, you could tell, like, he had formed some attachment to Alice because he still thought about her afterwards, but not the way you would really think about a lover or anything like that. That was strange. And he regretted that the boy was going to have to die, but he still wasn't going to do anything to try to prevent it. So he's this very cold and detached person. And I feel like because this is the first book in the series, that leaves a lot of room for him to grow and maybe develop some humanity along the way. This book left me with so many questions about the world that it takes place in, because it's definitely post-apocalyptic. Maybe there were nuclear events or something. It's recent enough that they'll talk about like Beatles songs and stuff as songs of old. And there was the whole thing where Jake had memories of living in New York and like very normal things that we're used to. At first I was thinking that maybe the Man in Black like resurrected him somehow, but from after hearing the Man in Black's speech about the tower at the end, it sounds like the tower is like some kind of a temporal meeting point where every time meets at the tower. So you can like, maybe the Man in Black just went and plucked Jake out of the time where he died and brought him back to the time the Gunslinger is in. I don't really know. And then there are oracles and prophecies, and these prophecies come true. Like, the Gunslinger seems to know that the prophecy will happen, and we don't really know why, because we also know that whatever the oracle is, it's some kind of a malevolent being that's trying to hurt people. And then when they were underground in the mining tunnels or whatever, and there were all these, like, zombie creatures attacking them, those are people, I guess, who are left over from, like, a nuclear apocalypse or some kind of plague, I don't know. And it would, like, they were just barely mentioned in passing, and I would like to know a lot more about where they came from and what's going on with them. Oh, and then the Man in Black is so strange, because for a lot of the book you thought he was some kind of magician or sorcerer, but then once the Gunslinger actually starts talking to the Man in Black, it seems to be leaning away from, like, mystical magic and wizardry and more into, like, scientific things, maybe, and more into, like, the sci-fi genre. And it's interesting, the dynamic. The Man in Black knows that the Gunslinger can't kill him because he's the only one who can help the Gunslinger find the tower. And the Gunslinger was chasing the Man in Black, but the Man in Black somehow wanted to be caught, and then once he was caught, he told the Gunslinger things that the Gunslinger just accepted as true, even though you don't really know why. It's almost like there's some kind of a magical right of if you catch someone, they have to tell you the truth. But then why would the Man in Black let the Gunslinger catch him? And then why would he read his fortune and, like, predict his future for him when that seems like it helps the Gunslinger more than it does the Man in Black? Though during that whole kind of strange interaction they were having when they had their weird, I don't know, maybe it was the grass stuff that's like some kind of a drug they were taking, maybe that's what made that interaction so weird. But the Man in Black gave this great speech about, like, the size of the universe and how, like, humanity trying to find its place, where you fit in, and if the whole, what we perceive as the universe is just a grain of sand in someone else's universe, how insignificant we are. And that was really interesting to think about. And just hearing that speech was really cool and very thought-provoking. So basically, I finished this book, and I feel like I've just barely gotten to know these characters in this universe. I still don't know if there is magic in this universe or if it's all science fiction. I don't know what the tower is, other than that it's vaguely related to time travel, maybe. I don't know why the Gunslinger wants to find it. I don't know very much about his past. I don't know who the Man in Black is or how he works, what his powers and abilities are. I have so many questions. So I think this is a really good setup for a series, because it is just like a little introduction and just to kind of make you really want to read more. And so I am definitely going to pick up the next book, and I cannot wait to figure out what is happening in this crazy world.